This video covers the ProLib system defaults. System defaults are parameters that are set up by you, the librarian, to define how you want ProLib to run in your library. To get into the defaults, click on Administration and then click on System Defaults. This takes you into a multi-page program. At the top here it says that there are 4 pages. We're only going to cover pages 1 and 2 in this particular video. I will step down through each of the fields, describing what each one does, and then when we've finished, one would click on Save to save that information away into the database and move on to the second screen. So let's go back to the top of the screen. Registered as is a short name that we give to your library. Please do not change this. Open for business is one of the library statuses. You can choose which status you want to run your library in at any point in time. Open for business means that anybody who has access to ProLib can work on the system. Closed for stocktake means that you, the librarian, have closed the system and you only want the librarian and the sub-librarians to be able to access the system. Your monitors or pupils and other staff members would be locked out of the software. Temporarily closed is a facility that is used by the librarian to temporarily close the library so she can check up on something. These two options, closed for stocktake and temporarily closed, are only used very rarely. Once a year you might do a stocktake. So don't worry about these two fields at this point in time. The next field down, the library name, in this case Princeton High School Library, is the name that we agree with you at the start of the system for the name of your library. It might be Princeton High School Media Center or Princeton High School Library, or in some cases the library has been named after a past headmaster or principal or librarian, and so it might be called the Barbara Breer Library. Fill in the street address and the postal code, and fill in your postal address and the postal code, and then one gets down to these lines down here. These two lines are for your librarian and for the librarian helper or the sub-librarian. So you fill in the name of the librarian and also her cell number, and then there's name of the sub-librarian and her cell number if she has one. We use the cell numbers to be able to contact the librarian in cases where we need to describe something to her or to warn her of a particular problem that we picked up in the software. Not that that happens very often. At the bottom of the screen you have a line that says the Progen Hotline, and it gives you the cell number which you must phone if you want to access our hotline support group. Up in this corner here you'll see there are 2 fields, and they cover your enabling code and when it expires. This particular school, the software is going to expire on the 30th of November in 2021. If they wanted to run it for another year, then we would have given them a code that would go, say, 30/11/2022 and a new enabling code. So once a year, you are going to come into the screen and simply fill in these 2 fields here and click on Save, and your system is now updated for another 12 months. And so we get onto the second page. I'm going to cover this in a bit more detail. The default year is the year in which your library is running. Don't ignore the 2020 in this particular screen. It's because the data we've got in here is system test data, and we're running it just in 2020. The default language is either E for English or A for Afrikaans or X for Xhosa. And the default language is the language that is given to a book when you first accession it, or to a library member when you first put them into the system, because it thinks it's the default, that most of your pupils have that particular language, or most of your books have that particular language. And when you put the person in, you can, of course, change this. So you might have a default language of Afrikaans, but you're putting in a pupil whose home language is English. You just change the Afrikaans language to English. Magazines and periodicals. ProLib allows you to put in your books under various material types, one of which would be magaz, which we use to identify a book as being a magazine or a periodical. We do this so that when you print out reports, you can decide whether you want to actually include the magazines or periodicals in that particular printout. Often you will have hundreds and hundreds of magazines in your library, and you don't want to clutter up a report by having them printed on the actual report itself. ProLib allows you to hold in the background the contact details of either the member or the member's parents. Normally it would be the member themselves if we're looking at a tertiary institution, or it would be the member's parents if we're looking at a school situation. So if you want to have that information in the background, tick this particular field. We found that in most cases, schools do not need this information. The librarian can go to the front office to pick up the cell phone number or the email address of any parent that she wants to contact, and therefore it's not necessary to duplicate that information inside the library. The next field down, the next automatic accession number, is used so that the system can automatically give a number, an accession number, to a book as you accession it into the system. Every book in your library has a unique accession number made up of 6 digits. The first 2 represent the year that you put it into your library, and the last 4 represent a sequential number starting at 1, going up to 9,999 if you were lucky to have so many books in your library for a particular year. In this case, it's telling the system that the next book that is to go into the year 20 must be given the accession number 20,002. ProLib has a fines subsystem built into it. Many librarians do not want to use the fines subsystem, and therefore they would untick this particular field here, and that would take away all of the fine defaults for your particular system. But if you want to use fines, click on that field there, and then it will ask you to put in how much do you charge per default fine day, and you could say I'm going to charge them 0.20 rands, in other words 20 cents. Do you want to print automatic fine deletions? ProLib allows the librarian to delete a person's fines if there is a good enough reason to do so. If you want to use this facility, then tick this particular field. If you do not want to use it and you want the fines to remain within the system, no matter what, then leave the field unticked. If you tick it, then when a book is issued or returned for a particular member, if that person has fines, it will pop up with a little screen that says they have, say, 5 rands worth of fines. Do you want to automatically delete them? And if you say yes, those fines are then automatically removed from the system, and the member goes back to a fine status of 0. Do you want to print fine slips? If you tick this field, when you are looking at a person's fines or giving a person a new fine, if you want to print out a list of all the fines that they've got and the value that they still owe you, then you would tick that particular field. The issues during a holiday is a facility whereby you can allow books to be issued during your school holidays. What happens is that the system automatically calculates the return date, and if that return date is in the middle of a holiday, because you've ticked this field, it will then move the return date to the first date of the next term. This is a lovely facility to allow pupils to take out books over an extended period and over the school holidays. ProLib allows you to reserve books by title. And you can get to a stage where you could have far too many reserves in the system for a particular popular book, and so you want to limit the number of reserves, and after that the system would say, no, you've got to wait a while to the person that wants to reserve it. If you want to reserve it, then put into here the maximum number of reserves that you think you would like your library to work under. Every book in the system can be given an automatic default cost. You can put in costs for fiction books, for fact books, and for reference books. These values will be automatically put onto any book that doesn't have a value. But if the book already has a value, or you want to change the default value, then please do so. The beauty about this is that you can then run a report to give to your auditors showing them the total value of all the books in your library, and you will be amazed at how much your library is really worth. When you're returning books, ProLib checks various figures or facts within the system and displays to you, the librarian, various errors. Sometimes the librarian might decide that she doesn't want to see these errors, that she will deal with them in a different way, and therefore you have the option to switch the error on or off. If you want to see a member has fines when they're returning books, then tick the field. If you want to see that a member has been blacklisted for some reason, tick that field. If you'd like to see that a book coming back in has had reserves put against it, and you'd like to see who the reserve people are, and then issue a letter to the first person that deserves that reserve, then tick this particular field. And also, if a book has been weeded at some time while it's still out, and you want to now take that weeded book and remove it from the issue system, then tick that particular field there. If you don't want any of these facilities, then what you do is you untick them. And then that error or that facility will not be shown to you as books are being returned to the system. There are also various other messages about members, whether they're blacklisted or they've got fines or something like that, and you might want to know those when books are being issued or returned. And you have the option here to decide when those errors must pop up. Must they be during the issues and returns systems, or must they only happen for issues, or must they only happen for returns, or don't show any of the member errors at either of those points in the system. Okay, that's covered the whole of the section of page 2. Going to end this particular video at this point, and we'll move on to the next video to other screens within the system defaults. Click on Save to save your information.